Evelyn paused on the marble steps of the Westboro Public Library, a place that had been her professional home for the past 5 years. She held the same sense of quiet reverence for libraries that a poet might for cathedrals. In her carefully tailored sweater set and conservative shoes, she radiated an unflappable serenity, perfectly suited to the hush of the institution she served. Her dark brown hair was pinned back in a neat, no nonsense bun that exuded elegance, though perhaps a bit of caution, too. Most people thought of her as reserved, but she liked to think of herself as unwavering, someone who found beauty in tradition and stability. She inhaled the crisp autumn air that morning, glancing up into a canopy of golden leaves fluttering against the library's stone facade. It felt like a new chapter was about to begin. A month earlier, she had been asked to spearhead a charity book drive, an enormous project intended to send children's stories, textbooks, and novels to literacy programs in underprivileged communities. The library board had decided that it was time to partner with librarians from across the city, unifying different branches under one heartfelt cause. The idea thrilled Evelyn, though it also made her anxious. She valued rules and structure. A large event inevitably brought chaos. Still, she committed herself wholeheartedly, believing in the mission. If carefully managed, it could not just provide books to those who needed them, but also show the city what libraries could accomplish when they joined forces. As she entered the library, a wave of familiarity welcomed her. The faint squeak of the old wooden doors, the smell of time-worn pages, and the rows of shelves that never failed to make her feel safe. She headed to her desk, which was fastidiously organized, its surface adorned only by a vase of fresh daisies, a neat stack of papers, and a carefully placed nameplate. Evelyn Monroe, head librarian. Then, on the corner of her desk, her phone began to buzz with a discordantly modern ring. She dropped her handbag and answered. "Hello, this is Evelyn Monroe of Westboro Public Library." "Evelyn, hi, it's Margaret from the board," a cheerful voice came through. "I'm calling with an update about the charity book drive coordination. We've enlisted some help from the Carmichael Civic Library on the other side of town. They're sending someone over today to finalize all the details, gather the promotional materials, the usual things. We want to get this going soon." Carmichael Civic was known for being a more avant-garde library, full of modern technology and new age programming. She had heard rumors that its staff was equally unconventional, but tradition was about to meet technology, and despite her reservations, she knew the partnership would be beneficial. "Of course," Evelyn said, squaring her shoulders. "I'll make sure everything is ready." When she ended the call, she smoothed her sweater, marched to the main reading room, and began arranging a corner display for the charity drive. She couldn't help but wonder who Carmichael would send. Would it be an overzealous tech enthusiast who thought old libraries needed to catch up with the times? She resolved to keep an open mind. Nevertheless, as lunchtime approached, her stomach fluttered with anticipation. At noon, a gust of brisk autumn air swept through the library's entrance. Evelyn, adjusting a sign that read, "Share the joy of reading," turned around to see a tall man with a satchel slung over his shoulder and a warm grin on his face. He wore black jeans, a casual shirt with the top button undone, and a pair of sneakers, in stark contrast to the quiet hush of Westboro's customary dress code. His hair was chestnut brown, and it seemed perpetually ready to fall over his forehead in unruly waves. Evelyn felt an unbidden flush of curiosity. This must be the delegate from Carmichael Civic. "Hello," he said, making eye contact with the same care he might reserve for a dear friend. "I'm Jasper Reed from Carmichael Civic Library. They told me you'd be expecting me." Evelyn cleared her throat. "Yes, I'm Evelyn Monroe. It's good to meet you." She noticed the faint shadow of stubble on his chin, and she tried not to stare. "Let's head to the reading room and discuss the details of the drive." They settled at a large wooden table near a wall of medieval history volumes. She offered him tea, which he politely declined, waving his hand with an easy smile that suggested he never took anything too seriously. Evelyn's eyes flickered to his satchel, which she thought might contain a laptop or some kind of sleek tablet, but instead he pulled out a battered notebook, the edges of which were worn from frequent handling. That small observation relaxed her slightly. So, Jasper began, tapping his pen on a crisp new page, the board wants us to collect 10,000 books for donation, right? Carmichael is covering all the children's literature, Westboro is focusing on academic and classics, and the rest of the libraries around town will handle everything else. We should talk about funding, volunteer schedules, and promotion. Evelyn nodded. Yes, precisely. It's going to be a lot of collecting, sorting, and labeling. The distribution is planned for early December, which doesn't give us much time. When 2 hours had passed, they had drafted a list of tasks and started forming teams of volunteers. Jasper kept injecting enthusiastic ideas, such as hosting an outdoor mini reading festival to draw in donations. Evelyn admired the energy, though she felt compelled to ground it with practical concern, and she had to make sure there were enough staff members, enough coverage for normal library hours, an adequate budget. Yet Jasper's optimism and inventive suggestions were undeniably appealing. By the time the meeting ended, Evelyn felt something she had not anticipated, a faint longing to continue the conversation. Maybe we'll coordinate again soon, Jasper said, sliding his notebook into his satchel. Could we do a quick site visit at Carmichael tomorrow? I could show you how we plan to coordinate the tech side of tracking donations. Evelyn gave a measured smile. That sounds useful. Give me a time and I'll be there. The next day, she drove her modest sedan across town. The Carmichael Civic Library was nestled between a contemporary art center and a bustling farmer's market, a testament to its more progressive philosophies. When she entered, the space felt bright and modern, with open seating, glass partitions, and computer stations that flanked walls of books. Everything about it seemed the opposite of Westboro's old world charm. Yet she noticed that the patrons seemed equally enraptured by the written word. Children ran excitedly over to shelves of new releases, while older visitors immersed themselves at digital catalog stations. Jasper was seated at a table near a large mural depicting the history of literature, from ancient scrolls to futuristic screens. He greeted her with a wave and sturdy handshake. Over the next hour, he demonstrated how a specialized barcoding system would expedite the handling of donated materials and offered a guided tour of the facility. Evelyn listened intently, occasionally asking questions that revealed her preference for thorough planning. Every now and then Jasper would make a joke, and though her laughter was reserved, he could see her eyes sparkle with recognition. Afterward, he insisted on taking her to a brand new coffee kiosk the library had installed, which offered an entire menu of artisanal blends. She imagined that her coworkers back at Westboro would balk at having a coffee bar anywhere near the hushed reading rooms. But here it was normal. Jasper ordered a vanilla latte with confidence, while Evelyn selected a simple espresso. They took their cups to a wooden bench outside, where potted plants and a small fountain lent a sense of calm to the environment. Nearby, a whimsical sculpture of a giant open book stood as a tribute to literary imagination. So, Jasper said, sipping from his latte, how does all this measure up to what you're used to? I'll admit, it's different, Evelyn replied, choosing her words carefully, but I see the appeal. I'm glad people find new ways to engage with libraries. Honestly, I've always believed that the written word is universal, no matter how we present it. Though, you might guess I take comfort in the old methods. He studied her with a thoughtful expression. That's one of the things I love about librarianship. We can honor tradition and still explore new possibilities. He paused, a subtle glint in his eyes. It's like the literature we collect. Some stories are centuries old but remain timeless, and new voices are being discovered every day. Evelyn found herself smiling. Yes, that's precisely what draws me to this world. It's a place where time stands still, even as it rushes forward. They continued to chat until the sun slipped lower in the sky. By the time Evelyn returned home, she felt a lift in her spirit she couldn't quite explain. She chalked it up to the excitement of working on an important project. But later, as she settled into her pajamas and poured a glass of water, she realized that part of that excitement had to do with Jasper. Over the following weeks, the charity book drive moved from an abstract plan to a tangible initiative. Posters all over town encouraged people to donate. Local coffee shops offered discounts to those who brought in a book for the cause. And schools sent flyers home with students, inviting families to participate. On the big day of collecting donated books at Westboro, Evelyn was in constant motion. She managed volunteers, kept track of intake forms, and graciously thanked donors. Even old Mr. Thompson, a patron known for his daily crossword puzzles, donated a stack of vintage classics he'd collected over the years. Evelyn felt the momentum building, a sense that they were doing something invaluable for the community. Amid the flurry, Jasper appeared with two large boxes packed with children's stories and educational materials from Carmichael. He navigated the swirling crowd with natural warmth, joking with local families and shaking hands with volunteers. Whenever he spotted Evelyn, his face softened into a smile. "Let me help you with that," he offered, watching her struggle to balance multiple boxes. Together, they brought them into a storage room. At some point, they realized they were alone in the quiet space, the bustle of the event continuing just beyond the door. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the tension of the day melted away. A fleeting question crossed both their minds. Could something deeper be unfolding between them, beyond just professional camaraderie? Evelyn placed the boxes on a metal shelf and exhaled. "Thank you," she said, rubbing her wrist. "I hate to admit that I sometimes get so stuck in the logistical details." "That's what makes you good at what you do," Jasper said, looking at her kindly. "A library is nothing without structure, right?" She opened her mouth in surprise. She had always assumed people saw her approach as stuffy or rigid. But here was someone who appreciated it, who recognized that the organization was part of her passion, not just an arbitrary set of rules. "Thank you," she repeated, this time with more sincerity. They returned to the main event soon after, but she carried that moment with her like a cherished bookmark. In the ensuing days, the charity drive progressed to phase 2, sorting and cataloging the thousands of donated books. This was a massive effort that involved staff from various libraries volunteering their time after hours in a central facility. Long rows of tables were set up, each station labeled for a specific genre or reading level. Jasper and Evelyn often found themselves side by side, tagging and categorizing, comparing notes on classic novels, or rereading a passage here or there that reminded them of why they loved the written word in the first place. Their conversations started to tiptoe into personal territory, like the books they first fell in love with as children, or the lesser-known authors who had shaped their perspectives. Sometimes they worked in companionable silence, a quiet harmony of scanning codes and placing books in the right piles. Other times they bantered lightly. He teased her about how precisely she stacked the books, always aligned at perfect angles, and she ribbed him for wearing his sneakers in all settings, even a formal library board meeting. One evening, they worked so late that by the time they finished, it was nearly 9 o'clock. The building's electricity was reduced to half lights, and most volunteers had gone home. Evelyn walked into the hallway, feeling that faint aftertaste of exhaustion mixed with satisfaction. Jasper caught up to her, gently placing a coat over her shoulders. "Hey," he said, "could I interest you in grabbing a bite to eat? There's a diner down the street that's still open." She hesitated. Few people in her life invited her for spontaneous meals, and she was so used to ghostly quiet nights in her apartment, cooking for one and reading until bedtime. But a flicker of curiosity nudged her to accept. They ended up at a cozy diner with checkered floors and laminated menus. Not many people were out at that hour, so they had a booth to themselves. She chose a simple salad, while he went for the diner's so-called famous cheeseburger. When the waiter placed their orders, Evelyn felt a new sense of comfort wash over her, as if stepping outside her routine was not so terrifying after all. Between mouthfuls, they eased into deeper conversation. Jasper talked about how he had drifted into librarianship after spending years traveling and writing short stories that never quite sold. He admitted being prone to restlessness, although finding a place to put roots down, like Carmichael had, brought unexpected fulfillment. In turn, Evelyn revealed her reluctant confession. She had once dreamed of traveling across Europe in a sort of literary pilgrimage, visiting the birthplaces of her favorite authors. But she never found the courage or simply never made it a priority. "It's not too late, you know," he said softly, his expression full of encouragement. "Places like Shakespeare's hometown or the libraries of Paris will still be there." She looked down at her plate. "Sometimes it feels like I've missed my chance. I don't know if it's me or if it's the fear of stepping away from my responsibilities." Jasper reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but close. "You never have to give up your sense of adventure just because you also value stability. It's all about finding the right balance." A lull fell between them as she absorbed his words. Briefly, their eyes locked, sharing a sense of mutual understanding. In that moment, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them and the soft hum of the diner's fluorescent lights. The final stage of the charity drive approached in early December, a citywide celebration where they'd distribute the donated books at a local community center. The event included reading corners for children, informative sessions for adults, and even a small pop-up library for anyone wanting to register for a card. Both Westboro and Carmichael came together for final preparations. Jasper and Evelyn found themselves spearheading everything from the layout of tables to the scheduling of read-aloud sessions. On the day of the event, a gentle snowfall began outside, coating the sidewalks in a thin blanket of white. Indoors, though, the atmosphere was all warmth and generosity. Families arrived, picking up sacks of books for themselves or for neighbors. Volunteers helped match parents with the right reading level and interest type for their children. Teachers and literacy advocates held mini seminars on how to create a reading-friendly environment at home. Evelyn drifted through the crowd, checking on the donation boxes, answering questions, and occasionally stealing glances at Jasper across the room. At one point, she found him reading aloud to a group of children, his voice animated and engaging. The sight tugged at her heart, in a way she could only describe as gentle wonder. His face lit up while sharing a story about an imaginary sea voyage involving mermaids and hidden treasure. A small girl in pigtails was perched on his knee, listening with rapt attention. When the day wound down, staff and volunteers gathered to celebrate their success. A few of Jasper's friends from Carmichael high-fived him. Evelyn's board members patted her on the back. The drive had surpassed its goal, collecting more than the projected 10,000 donated books. It was a triumph, both personal and collective. A hush fell over the room as Margaret, the board member who initially arranged their collaboration, announced a thank you speech. She mentioned Evelyn and Jasper by name, praising their leadership. "And thanks to all your hard work," Margaret said with a flourish, "countless children and families will now have greater access to books. This is what community is all about." As the applause died down, Jasper turned to Evelyn. "You really made this happen," he said softly. "I'm proud of you." She felt her cheeks warm. "We did this together," she insisted. "I never would have tackled a project of this size with the creativity you brought to it." He reached for her hand. His fingers were warm, a contrast to the nip in the air blowing through the open windows. Around them, people were chatting, but the two of them existed in a small circle of shared attention. Slowly, he laced his fingers with hers, and she did not pull away. After a moment, he said, "It might be a little forward, but I was thinking we should celebrate, just you and me, someplace quiet. Maybe tomorrow night." Her smile was immediate. "I'd like that," she admitted, wondering if her flush was noticeable. The day had already felt extraordinary, and this invitation made it feel even more so. The following evening, Jasper planned a small surprise. He picked Evelyn up at her apartment. She found him waiting outside his car with another battered box of books. She raised an eyebrow playfully. Did we not collect enough during the drive? She teased. He grinned, opening the trunk to reveal a blanket, a thermos, and still more books. I was thinking we could go to the lake outside town. It's chilly, but there's a gazebo where we can set up a little reading nook just for us. He held up the thermos. Hot cocoa, in case your verdict on newfangled coffee shops is still out. They drove out of the city under a lavender sky, turning off onto a country road that led to a small, scenic lake with an old wooden gazebo at the water's edge. The moon was already visible, a silver disk above the pines. The area was nearly deserted, just the occasional echo of a distant owl or the scurrying of small animals in the underbrush. The gazebo had a single lamp, casting a soft glow that illuminated the ground dusted with snow. Jasper spread out the blanket on one of the benches, then poured 2 cups of cocoa. The rich aroma filled the crisp night air. Under the lamp's comforting circle, they opened one of the books, an anthology of romantic poetry from around the world. They took turns reading aloud, their voices reverberating softly against the still water. At times they paused to sip cocoa, or to watch the moonlight glimmer on the lake's surface. Evelyn felt a swirl of sensations. Reading had always been deeply personal for her, but sharing it this way was exhilarating. She realized that, in some ways, Jasper's presence made every page more meaningful. Finally, with the hush of the world around them, he set the book aside. I never expected to find someone who views books with the same awe as I do, he whispered. And I never expected to want to write a new chapter in my own life so badly. She felt her heart pound in her ears. With tender resolve, she leaned toward him, and their lips met in a soft, sweet kiss. Like words melding into the perfect sentence, their moment felt inevitable. She tasted cocoa and the cold winter air on his lips, warmth and coolness together, just like their personalities. Beneath that wooden gazebo, they lingered. The lamp seemed to brighten for just them, and the cold December wind no longer felt quite so biting. The pages of the anthology rustled at their feet, as if moved by a gentle breeze. She placed her hand on his cheek, savoring the warmth, and he wrapped his arms around her, steadying them both at the precipice of a brand new story. They stayed out far longer than they probably should have. By the time he drove her back, the sky was dotted with brilliant stars. Neither of them wanted to part, but they both knew they had a day's work ahead at their respective libraries. Before he walked her to her door, he touched her hand gently one last time. "You'll let me know if you have any more book drives that need coordinating?" he asked, a playful twinkle in his eye. She laughed softly, unlocking her door. "I'm sure we can invent something. Maybe an initiative to bring autobiographies of obscure explorers to light, or a story hour featuring rare translations of Russian classics. The possibilities are endless." He stepped closer, brushing a kiss against her temple. "I like that about you. Possibilities." With that, he said goodnight, and she watched him return to his car, feeling a surge of new emotions flutter through her. In all her years of quiet work amidst the shelves, she had never expected such a grand shift. She had found someone whose outlook was her complement, a man who respected tradition but reached for the unknown. Now she suspected that each bookshelf, each carefully alphabetized row of titles, was a witness to all the hidden stories ready to unfold in life if she dared to open up. When she entered her apartment, she shrugged off her coat and drifted to her personal bookshelf, brushing a finger across the spines of her favorites. Tonight, they seemed a little brighter, as though they had gained new meaning. She thought of the children who would soon be reading the charity-donated books, and of families discovering new worlds in the pages of worn paperbacks. Love, it seemed, had a role here too, weaving narratives in real time. She curled up on her sofa, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips, heart full of hope. She realized that life was not so different from the novels she adored. An unfolding tale, each chapter revealing vital pieces of a larger story. Sometimes the path meandered, sometimes the plot thickened, but ultimately each scene led to something worthwhile. The collaboration that started out as a project to share books had, in turn, written an entirely new chapter for her and for Jasper. Both those shelves filled with stories of love, adventure, and discovery. And though they had only just begun, she could sense, with quiet excitement, that the pages of what they were creating together could become their favorite story yet.